Right. Are we all ready for a nice sync clap?
Yeah. Are you recording, by the way, Caleb?
No.
Yes. Yes. Yes, I am.
All right.
Right, recording, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. Sync clap in 3, 2, 1. Hello, guys. Welcome to the podcast, a collaboration between the Two Graves film and the Widow film. Me, Caleb, and Greg worked on the Widow film, and then you've also got Josh and James who worked on the Two Graves film.
So,
So I'm going to go on to Josh here with the synopsis of his film.
yeah, thanks, Caleb. So James and I have been working on the film Two Graves, which is about a man running away from something that he's done. It's, on the face of it, it's more of just a sort of crime thriller, but there's a lot of hidden levels to it. So I think it's quite an interesting project. But Greg, can you tell me about what the Widow film's about?
Oh, of course. The Widow is a story about a woman coming to terms with losing the one she loves. She is a widow, as the film's title suggests.
So obviously thinking about it, the themes kind of going across, especially the Widow film, is going to be very much this idea of grief and dealing with the challenges of it. So through the film, you're going to kind of, there's a bit of the creepy side within it, if you get what I mean. Like, wouldn't you agree, Greg? It's a bit creepy, you know. There's kind of a bit of a supernatural element to it, I'd kind of say.
There's the feel of supernatural from her being able to hear the ghost, quote unquote, of her past lover, which is just her memories. And we're kind of taking the idea of the memories and putting them into a more supernatural theme for the sake of thriller and for the sake of showing that not everything is right as she's going through the cycle of grief.
Yeah, for me, I'd say it's almost like a dreamlike state. The way we filmed it is to very much be perceived as it's like a dream. It's not kind of real life. It's this kind of alternative reality for her where her kind of lover is still alive. But he's kind of presented within as kind of like a ghost, very much so.
Yeah, so that psychology kind of runs with us, because where our films are quite different, with yours being about grief and ours being sort of a crime thriller, but that sort of link of the psychology of the two, they're quite sort of closely, sort of quite tightly knit. And the fact that we both filmed our films during the pandemic means that we've sort of been through similar sort of trials and tribulations in trying to get these projects made, but I think we can all sort of agree that there was a certain funness to it as well.
Well, I feel like the filming through the pandemic was an interesting situation. I can't lie, like especially where you had the kind of groups of 6, like that really made it a struggle where you couldn't necessarily work with the people you really wanted to work with. You had to kind of stick to your kind of group. Obviously, this idea of bubbling with people, making sure you're sticking to the same kind of people. So obviously, the kind of only outside sources would have been your actors.
Yeah.
Obviously, for you guys, you very much kind of kept it to a kind of select few of people, didn't you?
Yeah, it was. We worked really within our team, because James and I would sort of support bubbling throughout the pandemic so we could make the project. But we also worked with Greg and Cullen to get one of the scenes shot, which would have taken so much longer if they hadn't helped. But, you know, it was masks on and social distanced and everything. And because of the rule of 6, we were allowed to do that. But yeah, you're right. It was definitely difficult. But we got around that sort of problem by sort of casting ourselves in it. So we didn't have to go to outside actors and organise transport and meet times and distancing and all these different sort of layers of red tape that you have to deal with. We just sort of cast ourselves, so it's sort of staying in-house and very much sort of simple and easy.
I think for your film, especially with casting yourself in it, I think quite an interesting point of your film is the fact that you shaved your head for it.
It's starting to grow back. Yeah, it's getting there. I've not shaved the top again yet.
I think that was quite an interesting point, you know, almost method.
Well, yeah, it's not exactly Christian Bale, but it was something to do. I thought it would look cool in the film if our character sort of goes through a very physical sort of transformation and has that disconnect between his like psychological needs and his physical sort of appearance.
Obviously, we've watched through the film before release to obviously get some ideas for this podcast. I really like the way your character's still kind of perceived as a badass, even with, like, obviously I'm not going to spoil it for the release, but obviously coming to the end of the film, he's still perceived as a badass kind of throughout. I don't know whether that was your intention or anything, but it was just quite interesting to me to watch the kind of differences in our characters, where your one's kind of got this kind of badass kind of style throughout. He's like, oh cool, I'm gonna shave my head and stuff like that. Like it's just a really interesting way of presenting it.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, but the film sort of acts as a it's sort of a yin and yang, because yes, you do have that sort of stereotypical sort of character, but then also he goes through a bit of a change. You know, the whole sort of film is about a transition from one state of being to another, and it's a very sort of, well, you could say spiritual, but it's a very sort of psychological kind of process to do it.
What do you think on it, James?
Hard. Yeah, I mean, we had very little equipment as well. I know for the first shoot we had, we used what was it, the C100, didn't we?
Yeah.
For that one, and that was like the start of the film. But then towards the end, we went on just to your little camera, which had to make do with what we had. Really, we had obviously very little sound equipment, just one tripod, one camera, it was a shotgun mic or something, wasn't it? And that's literally all we got to use, really. But I don't know, it turned out very well for what we had.
Yeah, I mean, we made do, and that's really what it was about, was just being resourceful with what very few resources we had. I mean, how did you guys find that? I mean, shooting your sort of shot, it's quite an elaborate kind of layout that you guys had with yours. It's very impressive how you got it done.
I think Greg could agree. We had a decent amount of equipment going on to it, didn't we, Greg?
Yeah, and we also had 2 shoots involved, considering we had to reshoot most of the film. But we were able to get quite a lot of kit. I believe we used the Sony FS5 camera, and then all the lenses that come with it, and the Samyang's, which helped create, a good cinematography within our film, and which allows the audience to kind of even feel that like they're there with the use of focus and everything else.
I think there's a part within our film with like the hidden match cut, which is quite interesting to shoot. It's like kind of the wrinkles in the shirt were like kind of a problem when cutting. It was because you could slightly tell the difference in cut, but it was an interesting thing to do. Like, I really enjoyed shooting it, and I think, as a lot of filmmakers can say, like, weather was the big problem.
Yeah.
We had a lot of weather problems. Like, we had a couple of people with umbrellas like holding it over the cameras and stuff like that. Like, it was an interesting film. I think that's one of the reasons we ended up having to reshoot the second time round for one of the scenes, wasn't it, Greg? We kind of had to allow to redo it again because bits just didn't quite go as planned.
Yeah, weather, as per usual in the lovely land of England, always screws us up.
What are you talking about? It's sunny.
Oh, always sunny.
Always sunny. We were expecting around 20% of rain, and of course when we got there it was raining heavily. And then it kept on raining for 4 hours as we filmed. And as soon as we left the set, it stopped raining. Which I think is great. It's a lovely
It did go sunny,
start.
didn't it? I remember.
Yes.
I went for a walk afterwards, and I was just like, "Why is it sunny now? Like, why now?"
Which is just an explanation of the film thing as a whole. Everything, you can plan for everything to happen, then you get there, everything screws up, and as soon as you're done, you feel like, oh, I could have done this, or this could have happened, which could save your film, which creates you wanting to do a reshoot, which we did.
To be fair, fortunately, I feel like the weather did add to the tone and kind of aspect of the film. It was very much, it worked perfectly, to be fair, because it very much matched that kind of idea of grief. It was like that kind of dingy, kind of unhappy kind of looking weather aspect.
It's the mixture of the weather itself creating the prophetic fallacy of like grief, but also that fact that we sadly shot early in the morning, which I utterly adored.
It was an interesting kind of shoot, wasn't it?
Yeah, so waking up 6 a.m. sharp, staying on set for 2 hours for no reason, and then starting to shoot at 8. It was...
Well, I remember at one point we were just sat in the car waiting for the rain to end, weren't we? We were just sat there. It was dark as you like. We're all just sat there making jokes, just waiting for the kind of rain to go, because we wouldn't have been able to shoot properly if the rain didn't hold off. Luckily, it ended up holding off at one point, and we had like a nice kind of gap to get it all filmed in. But it wasn't the ideal, but we do what we do.
So why did you guys have to do reshoots?
Because we didn't anticipate it raining as much as it did. We ended up having to reshoot a lot of bits. A lot of the footage didn't come out quite how we expected it to.
It was a lot of rushing on set, which, when making a film and you're rushing shots, is the one thing you don't want to do. And we had to reshoot because we felt sorry for our actors, because we didn't give them our angles, and everything we did wasn't allowing them to truly show off the whole magnificent performance they had.
Their expression to really come out properly, and I don't think we originally, because we were rushing, we were all kind of cold, we were all kind of hungry, stuff like that. Getting near the end of the shoot, and we did start to rush it slightly. So I feel like that reshoot, where we did take a lot more time and a lot more care in what we were doing, despite the rain, but we very much did learn, didn't we, that
Yeah.
we've got to, despite it, just kind of tread on through it and get it going.
And that's what film is, a learning experience most of the time.
Yes, always.
Yeah, so it was a lot easier for me and Josh because obviously we were the two actors in the film, so we could schedule a lot easier, and the reshoots were going to be easier because it was pretty much just a two-man crew, apart from the first couple of scenes. So, it was obviously a lot more flexible. It was just overall the production was a lot easier. Obviously, it was very cold on some of the nights.
Yes.
Other than that was the only problem we really ran into, wasn't it?
I mean, the weather, you're going to run into problems with that because we were all shooting sort of October, November, and that's really just the downturn into winter for autumn, really. So we were all experiencing sort of rain problems and temperature and stuff. I mean, I don't remember it being awful on the night that Cullen and Greg helped us out.
No,
I remember it being very
It might
cold.
have drizzled a bit, and it was very cold.
I don't think there was any
for
rain.
the most part.
I think the biggest problem then we had was the cars, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That's
We were
right, yeah,
filming
'cause
right on the high street.
I can imagine for the sound
Yeah.
it was like.
Yeah.
How did it come out? Were you quite happy with your film?
Actually, it's some of the best sound in the film because we had it. So we put the boom actual blimp inside the phone box because I was acting in the scene and there wasn't really any space to put the boom in from the side or anything.
Well, I love that scene. I thought it looked really good.
Thank you very much. I mean, it was really the team effort because, I mean, if we didn't have Greg or Cullen like running camera and lights and sound, it would have just been impossible.
Yeah.
But we had the blimp inside the phone box, sort of between my legs, and the boom pole would come in through one of the shattered windows of the telephone box that was shattered before we got there. We didn't do that. We just sort of had it set up like that. And because of the box being so isolated, there were holes that sort of went outside, but because of how directional the microphone was, the audio that came out was really quite good. And then we just Foleyed over the top of that, and that was it.
I think that's another thing, like, obviously you spoke about how Cullen and Greg were such a big help. It's that whole thing of, like, obviously typically you either have this actor or like this big name actor which will get the congratulations of the director, but it's that thing of like how it's this whole crew that really puts all the work in together, and it's this whole epitome of like a load of people coming together to make this kind of product or kind of film. I think that's such a key thing that people do forget. Like, it's a whole team of people that work on this thing, not just one director. It's incredible.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's the vision of a bunch of different people that all sort of works together.
Yeah.
And
It always ends up happening like this one director gets kind of like the thanks and the kind of it's all his inspiration and stuff, but you got to think there's such a massive team behind him that really put work in as well. Like, I think it's good to have all these people kind of get their recognition sometimes, especially like with the credits, for example. Like, a lot of people just skip credits, but sometimes it's always nice to look through the credits and kind of see who's worked on it and stuff like that.
which is nice because with your one, Josh, you have a thing just giving thanks to me and Colin, which I greatly appreciate it, to be fair.
no worries.
It's nice to see my name spelled right.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's good to see.
So it was really the sort of input from everyone is what makes the film possible, because you have the base idea, but you know that is one person's subjective view of how the story should be told, and having all these different people giving their input, it's difficult to filter through everything and find the stuff that works. But with us, because we didn't have a ton of time because we were filming in public, maybe without permits, but we were sort of, we weren't in anyone's way, so we sort of had a freedom to experiment with different camera angles and different kinds of shots. So, like, for instance, I wanted a close-up of the coins going in the payphone and then cutting to a close-up of the buttons being dialed. And we shot that, and I was sort of like hemming and hawing about it, but then Cullen just sort of said, well, no, what if I just sort of start the shot on the coins and then we whip pan down to the dial? And, it took a bit of practicing because, obviously it's a focus pull and a sort of whip pan with a macro lens, so it's going to be technically complicated. But I mean, it took 10 minutes and, it's in there because it is stylish and it looks good and it works. It's not over stylized, it's not too sort of simple. It's the perfect sort of thing for that specific sort of sequence.
Well, I think that's one thing that is really enjoyable to do, going like taking your time to really experiment with different types of shots. Like, you get your classic, just your close-ups and stuff like that, like your extreme close-ups of picking something up or whatever. But like you said, with that kind of whip pan, whip tilt, whatever, like very much doing different kinds of shots just to see what comes out. And then when you finally do get into that post-production stage, you can experiment with it all, kind of go through loads of different bits of footage, see what works, see what doesn't work. Well, like they always say, it's best to over film.
Yeah.
You always end up with hours of like, well, depending on obviously the length of your film, but like if you're doing a feature, you end up with probably hours of like unused footage, which can just straight go into like a kind of aftercut.
Not even extended cut. I mean, you might find that you've got a sort of iffy sort of sequence of shots, but those couple of frames that you thought weren't going to work, you drop them in and it makes it. Like, it's really just sort of shooting and getting as much coverage as you can. And that's the sort of principle with shooting guerrilla, and especially in the pandemic, because anytime you meet up with people, there's that risk. So it's like getting as much as you can so you can work off that footage as much as possible.
It's almost those experimental shots which will get your stuff noticed. Like, it's those interesting shots which people necessarily haven't tried or tried as much before, where people look at it and go, they executed that really well. And that's what will sometimes just get you noticed and get your film kind of a lot more recognition.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like you guys were saying with that sort of matched cut or sort of hidden transition that you guys did. Like, you don't have to do that, but, it's an interesting shot. It adds a bit of flair, and it's tricky to do, but I mean, I've seen it and you guys nailed it. So, it works for the project really well.
For that one especially, it almost kept the continuity going. Like, there's not like some forced kind of straight cut where you can easily see, it's just straight up changed. They've been forced to do that. It very much allows you to kind of easily transition into this next part of the scene, next part of the film. And it just looks seamless, which making a film seamless and kind of making the film's continuity kind of correct really is the best thing.
And it adds to the realism.
Exactly.
Which we care about. We want to make films that seem real. We don't want to go overly complex. Even with the film being a dream sequence, we wanted to present it as something that could really happen, not just go from this place to this place and giant things happening everywhere. With post-production, we did use bits of effects, mostly with the well, not to give spoilers, but we did use some effects which were okay. I could have done better, but it's one of them, really.
It's just making do with what you got.
It's your first time trying something, isn't it? Like, that's what it is. It's experimenting, trying, and eventually, once you do something wrong, you can do it right the next time.
Yeah.
I think that is so much what film is. Like, you're always learning, you're always understanding. Like, established filmmakers are still going to try new things and still get things wrong. But sometimes getting it wrong is what eventually leads you to getting it perfect.
Yeah.
Let's segue to James.
Yeah, I mean, sound-wise, I did try and keep everything pretty minimal. I just wanted to use the sound that we got on set, not use too much like Foley or anything. Just really stick with just the raw sounds that we got. And obviously we added a few little sounds here and there, but yeah, we're very little music as well.
Well, yeah, you intentionally wanted to remove the kind of music aspect from it because the music does incite emotions, doesn't it? Like,
yeah.
So if you kept it real without the kind of emotions from the music.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into it too much, obviously, because I don't want to do too many spoilers. But I wanted there's a gunshot, and I really wanted that to pop, if you like, in the film, so people could really. It would kind of shock the audience to that sound. Yeah.
This idea of feeling the sound. Well, going on to like kind of our sound, obviously Cullen's probably the best person to talk about this, but he ended up using kind of low bassy sounds to very much have the audience feel like they're feeling what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a cool way to go about it. And I especially know with Cullen, like we were talking about it and he was like, I just keep trying to add things. like every time he'd go back and listen to it, he'd try to add something else, and eventually you've just got to get to a point where you go, okay, enough's enough.
That's
you've
it.
just got,
You've got to cut
like,
yourself off.
well, otherwise you're just going to forever change it. I don't know what you were like with it, James.
I was going to say, I think the sound is very underappreciated in film. Like, people, obviously it's very, very important, but people really overlook sound.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so complex, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, obviously working on the sound made me realise how hard it actually is. It's not just add a sound effect here, add a sound effect there. It's really, really complicated.
I mean, the thing with sound is that with film, it's audio and visual. It's 50-50, but really, would you sit down and watch a film if the picture looked really good and the sound was absolute crap?
No.
Definitely not.
Because you can't sit through that stuff. Like, if it was recorded through like an in-camera microphone and the audio was clipping all the time, you wouldn't have the patience to sit through like a 5-minute film like that, let alone an actual movie. Like, sound is greatly underappreciated. I think film really is 70-30 in favour of sound to visuals.
Well, there's a really good quote by Alberto Cavalcanti. He kind of says, like, the picture is the medium of statement and the sound is the medium of suggestion. It's like that kind of idea where it all blends into one, but exclusively one shows you kind of the exact thing which is going on, and then the sound moves away from that, and you can very much suggest so many different things. It's like so many sounds that are coming off of camera and you just don't see it, but it really does suggest it like with music, how it suggests what's going on and it gives you that emotion. It gives you, it like kind of, with music, it very much forces you to kind of imagine it one certain way, doesn't it? And I think it's really cool that you kind of went away from that and kind of allowed the audience to make their own kind of connotations to what's going on.
Yeah, it's definitely what we focused on with the sound design.
I mean, that sort of dovetails quite nicely into sort of editing the picture as well, because that whole sort of thing about suggestion over actual explicitly showing things, I mean, that was vital for us because of our limitations. We had to work around having like sort of 2 actors in a tripod, so like having sound to suggest things and imply more than explicitly show, because it sort of ruins it if you fully show it, because fully showing it, if you don't do it exactly right, it kills it for the audience. And not doing it properly or doing it too much and overdoing it, that kills it too. It's about sort of having what's right for the film. And for us, we sort of managed to write it and shoot it in a way that sort of fit nicely with what we had. We worked within our sort of, we worked with our sort of boundaries,
Yeah.
in sort of tandem with them. Like, we didn't let them hinder our production. We didn't try and shoot for the moon and, reach Mount Everest. We prepared for what we had and we went with that. And I think we came up with a project that looks all right. And you guys certainly excelled with doing that sort of thing as well.
It's working within your limits, isn't it? It's like
Exactly.
not over pushing yourself, not like doing things which won't quite look right or isn't necessarily within your budget. But yeah, I think we've all really done great with this, and I'm excited for the release of both films, especially. Like, they'll both come out looking really good and hopefully they'll get a lot of traction.
Speaking of the release, when is it?
The 25th of March.
Whoa, that's so
Hey.
soon.
Both films,
Same
that
for
is.
both of the films.
Both films coming out on the 25th of March. Is looking good. Obviously, what we'll do is we'll leave a kind of links below or kind of on screen as to both of our kind of social medias, a specific one. But yeah, this podcast will be going up on our Vimeo. Is it going to go up on
Our YouTube channel.
your YouTube channel? But yeah, thank you for listening, guys, or watching, depending on how you're doing it. But yeah, thank you very much, guys. See you all later.
Take care.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.